impregnates you, so we're cutting you off. So there was my mother, who didn't know the language, wasn't an educated woman, and we lived in the slums of Bedford-Stuyvesant. And so we learned at an early age how to beg. And so we learned how to beg, and then eventually we learned how to steal in order to, get some food. And I remember nights when we didn't eat and we didn't have anything to eat, my mother would say, drink water, that will fill you up. So impoverished that those people that lived in projects were considered rich by us. That's how poor we were. And so eventually, my brothers and I, there were 7 of us, 7 boys. But there was something special about my mother. And that was that although she didn't have any education, although perhaps she wasn't rich or anything like that, but she had access to the King of Kings. And she took us to church and told us that Jesus Christ was the answer. I'd be honest with you, I didn't want to hear that. Because one thing led to another, and I got involved with gangs. And we were out there. In those days, gangs, they fought for territory. It wasn't like now, they're big enterprise, big business, and they fight over territory of selling drugs. So there's a big difference with gangs today and the gangs of yesterday. The gangs of yesterday didn't use automatic weapons. We used knives, sticks, antenna, and those, they call them, I think it was called zip gun, is it? Zip guns. We made those guns, and they had a .22 caliber bullet in them, and we shot each other in those days. And one thing led to another, and as you know, gangs, you find a lot of gangs, with, especially in places that the kids aren't monitored. When the parents are out both working, kids want to belong somewhere, and so they connect with these gangs. So from a violent gang life, there was one thing that split us up. The church tried, but they couldn't stop the gangs from being gangs. And so there was one thing that split the gangs. Her name was heroin. Drugs came into the scene, especially heroin in those days, and that split us up. We were all out there trying to get a bag of drugs. That was our entire life. Our whole life was consumed with the idea of getting a fix. And in those days, you use heroin, and if you mixed it up with cocaine, and you got out there, and all day long, you was trying to get a fix. It was 24 hours a day. You was out of the streets, and one thing led to another. I was in prison. Went to prison. Prison could not rehabilitate me. I went to various programs, and the more programs that I went, the more I felt hopeless, because I would go right back out and use drugs. So the more you try, and the more you fail, the more you feel like a failure. And you feel there's no other way. I'm trapped in this life, in this nightmare, in this bondage, in this enslavement. I might as well give my whole life to it, because I'm not going to get out of it. And my mother kept saying, well, Jesus. And every time she said that, it got me so upset. I said, Jesus? Are you insane? What do you mean by Jesus is going to set me free? I've tried everything. I've tried methadone, psychiatry, religion. I've tried everything. Mohammed speak, Jehovah's Witness, you name it. And nothing is happening. And so I succumbed to the lifestyle. And I lived a lifestyle of violence. My whole life was centered around violence. And violence against drug dealers, we call it taking them off. And so we took off drug dealers. And so in order for them not to come after you, you perpetrate a violent act on them. So I went around and took dealers and perpetrated violence on them, so they won't be able to come back and see me. And eventually, they caught up to me. And one day as I was walking, it was around this time in 1974, because Puerto Ricans, we love boxing and we love baseball. And it was around the pennant race. In those days, it was around September, not October. And I remember September of 1974. I was a guy that walked alone. I knew some people were out there to kill me. They tried. And so I was walking down this area, which was almost an abandoned area, factory paved area. And it was a Saturday night. And as I was walking past there, these folks, they were watching me for a number of months. And this was the ideal time. And so they got out the car with pistols and they started shooting. And they were using what you call dum-dum bullets. And these bullets are made to enter your body and to begin to rip it up. It doesn't, you can be shot from a short distance and with a 45 caliber, and the bullet will go in some cases it'll split, and it'll travel in your body, hitting different organs. You can knock an elephant out with that kind of bullet. And so the bullets hit me, 2 of them. I can feel all these bullets passing me by because you feel like a wind. Those of you that know it, that are familiar with war and warfare, you know that when you've been shot or you've been shot at, it's like this wind passing you by, these bullets. And I was hit here on my side, and these bullets entered my body and hit my intestine, 22 holes in my intestine, and it went down and hit my bladder, and then it went down and hit my main artery. And they splattered me out there in that factory paved place, no one around. And I started to die. I started to bleed profusely inside. I started to drown in my own blood. I was really bleeding. And, but you know what? It's not all in vain. When you bring the children in and you give them the stories about forgiveness, my mother often, like I said, she may not have any degrees, but she had access to the Almighty. And God, she had this faith that when she prayed, she believed that God was answering her prayer. And she heard about it. She heard that I was shot. Police, who were my enemies, one of my goals was to kill police. I've been arrested, beaten up by police officers, and I hated police officers. And yet, God dispatched these 2 police officers as I was laying there dying. I remember the words that I said to the Lord. I said, God, I deserve this, no doubt. Laying there dying, couldn't move. I said, but if you give me another chance, I will serve you. You give me my life, I will serve you. And you know what? God heard my cries. God is real. And police officers showed up. They heard the gunshots. They haven't even been a kind of noise. And they showed up and they knew that I was about ready to die. And so they risked their career by taking my body and throwing me in their back seat and taking me directly to the hospital. They knew that I was not going to live if we were waiting for the ambulance. But you know what? I'm reminded that God is a real, true God, God of forgiveness, a God of love, a God that hears your cries when you call upon the name of the Lord. My mother often said to me, if you call upon the name of the Lord, he shall save. And although I didn't want to hear that, but I was hearing it. The words are like seeds. They're planted into people's lives. And so when the time came, I remember that. I remember those prayers and those things that my mother spoke to me. And while I was in the hospital, they had to remove the people from my room. And they had to keep me there by myself because my life was in jeopardy. Not only because I was dying, but there were some folks that wanted to get to me. And so you cannot imagine, first of all, the sense of dying and dying hopeless. And then you cannot imagine while you're dying in a hospital, it had all kinds of machines trying to monitor me to keep me alive. And not knowing whether somebody's going to come in and finish you off. You cannot imagine the trauma behind that. And yet I just remember, I kept remembering, God, you know, I called upon you, and I know that you heard me. And people were coming to visit me. So don't stop people would come in and they would come directly to me and ask me, would you like prayer? You know I was in denial prayer. Because I didn't realize, I didn't know whether I was going to live or die. My family thought I was going to die. They were making preparation for me. But you know what? God heard my cries. He heard my mother's cries. And God decided that He was going to give me another chance.